Even if we weren't born in the 80s or 90s, we all have a little bit of that Gen 1 nostalgia. Hey trainers, and welcome, where today we'll be taking a dive into the question of, were Pokémon Red and Blue actually good games? We'll be discussing this by looking at other Game Boy family games and then comparing them to Pokémon. Please like and subscribe. This video took a lot of research, and it helps me produce more content for the future. We all know how Pokémon Red, Green, and Blue came to be, right? First, we'll start with why these games are even popular, and then we'll go with the comparisons. The three main things we'll be focusing on are the story, main game mechanics and game loops, and art direction. I'll also be compiling the quote-unquote points, so to speak, and doing a little tier list to help visualize my thoughts and their very official rankings. Red and Blue start on A tier because that's what I'm comparing the other games to. Maybe you'll even find some new games to try out. Pokémon Red and Green came out in 1996 Japan, and Red and Blue came out in September 1998 in North America. Australia got theirs in October 1998, and Europe didn't get Red and Blue until October 1999. Satoshi Tajiri, the Pokémon's creator, is something of a bug catcher himself. This was his main inspiration for creating Pokémon. It's a shame, then, why bug types are the weakest in all the games. I think they're pretty cool, honestly. He called the first Pokémon games The Story of a Boy's Summer Day. One RPG mentioned, which acted as inspiration for Tajiri, is the Final Fantasy Legend, the first RPG on the Game Boy. Art breeds art, people. Inspiration comes from everywhere. And if you feel particularly inspired, maybe drop a like or subscribe. It helps out a lot. Thank you. So, anyway, a really cool thing was that Ape Inc. was originally going to assist in developing the first Pokémon games. However, they proved to be too busy, focusing much of their time on Earthbound instead. Game Freak decided to break off once again and develop it themselves. The budget for this game was pretty low, already not off to a great start. They also had little to no knowledge in developing RPGs. As they continued working on it over the years, their staff, experience, and vision grew. This eventually culminated into Red and Green's release in Japan. A really cool thing that happened was the first ever event Pokémon, Mew. In the CoroCoro Comics in Japan, a children's magazine, they hosted the legendary Pokémon Offer event. 20 out of a total 7,800 entrants were selected to obtain Mew on their physical cartridges. This made the game skyrocket in popularity, with the games originally being kind of a sleeper pick, if you will. Not very popular before then. Also, interestingly enough, it wasn't quite popular among American kids either. During market research in the US, the results were not promising. However, Pokémon was already funded for a North American launch anyway. And, dude, this just goes to show how well marketing does work. They worked tirelessly to create the perfect slogan, gotta catch 'em all, create a catchy enough theme song, and coordinate all of the localization and English dub of the anime to prepare for the game's release, which happened 3 weeks after the North American anime debut. Needless to say, this clearly worked. Pokémon Red, Green, and Blue still are the highest-selling Pokémon titles of all time. 31.83 million copies of the games in total. So now that we have officially gotten the history way out of the way, how did these games really, honestly compare to the other RPGs of its time? Or, more in its playing field, RPGs on the Game Boy. Graphics, story, gameplay, all of it. Let's find out together, shall we? Right after this video sponsor. I'm actually not sponsored, I sponsor myself. Please like and subscribe so I can continue making content. And warning, spoilers ahead for the games mentioned. So, Pokémon before Pokémon existed. Kinda. Let's start with Dragon Warriors Monsters for the Game Boy Color, shall we? This game was developed by Square Enix and released on North American shelves in the year 2000. And I know what you're thinking. Hazel, Pokémon released in 1998, 2 years beforehand. And second gen was out by then too. Well, yes, but actually no. This video may be about games on the Game Boy or Game Boy adjacent consoles, but there does exist a Dragon Quest/Dragon Warrior game that came out before Pokémon. That Pokémon did indeed take massive inspiration from. Dragon Quest V came out on the Super Famicom in 1992. It wasn't released in America due to some programming issues, but in short, this game featured monsters that, after fought, could offer to join your party and be playable just as human characters could. This inspired the spin-off game Dragon Warriors Monsters, and here's where we are now. The story. Terry is the main character of Dragon Warriors Monsters, and he is attempting to save his kidnapped sister, Millie. A monster monster took her, but a different benevolent monster soon followed and told Terry where she was, as well as to follow him. Terry opts to go to the king for help, and the king was like, "Oh, so you're here to meet my request to beat this stupid tournament, right? No? Saving your kidnapped sister? Yeah, you know what? I know just the thing. Instead of us actually, searching for her, just do my thing first, and then maybe you can find her." I mean, legend says you get one wish if you win the tournament, so it's a win-win. Then the king gives Terry some monsters and shoos him on his way to become a master, all in the name of saving his sister. He follows the aforementioned monster to the kingdom of the Great Tree. In this game, Master refers to more the art of battling as opposed to catching and learning all about the different types of monsters. He then has to learn in the monster school, essentially a mini tutorial, and then he's off to fighting in the arena to beat the tournament and become the champion, getting his wish. Pokemon's story is also pretty simple. You collect 8 gym badges through battling and get to go to the Elite Four to prove your worth as a Pokemon trainer. You also have a rival. Your secondary objective is that you get to defeat an evil crime organization. The crime organization wants power, and the leader, Giovanni, seeks to obtain world domination through economic prowess and stealing powerful Pokemon. You still have the fetch questy stuff. You still need to collect things to get places, but in my opinion, the way Pokemon Red and Blue go about this is just a breath of fresh air comparatively. Pokemon from day one took a risk by describing some political shenanigans within its world and making the point of the game about personal betterment rather than pure golden heroism. Both do share wanting to be the best though, but I don't think Terry cares as much about that part. How does the gameplay compare? The battling is essentially the same deal, like many RPGs, but the catching is very different. Instead of battling them until they are low and then catching them in capsules, Dragon Warriors monsters uses an almost more humane approach. You feed them meat and then they have the chance to choose to follow you after battle. They actually get to willingly decide as opposed to being forced into a sci-fi capsule against nature. Instead of a handy Pokedex that tells you all about your monsters, you have to go into the library in this game. Like a physical library with books. The core gameplay involves climbing the ranks in order to become champion, but literal ranks. It reminds me of what they're doing for Legends EA, but 25 years earlier. You have a set number of fights in each rank, and then if you succeed, you move up. Each rank also costs money to participate, all in the name of saving your sister via mystical wishing. The cool thing that sets it apart from Pokemon, though, are the breeding mechanics. Dragon Warriors monsters relies on this heavily, and here's how it works. Breeding effectively combines 2 opposite-sex monsters to create a new, stronger monster at level 1 at the cost of the 2 parent monsters. Offspring will have higher level 1 stats, learn more abilities, and have higher level cap than tamed monsters. Breeding can be done in solo play in the Shrine and via link cable with a friend. These mechanics are honestly really cool. When you breed your OG monsters, they go away, but then you get left with a baby monster that can level up faster, is stronger, and has combined traits of both parents. This can even extend to the monster's resistances or skill sets. Basically, movesets like in Pokemon. However, the skill sets aren't really tied to the species or any typing or anything like that. You kind of have more control over what the monster is like. And truthfully, I think that's ingenious. Now, with Pokemon's gameplay, your abilities come from the 151 monsters you collect around Kanto. 251 including Johto, and Dragon Quest monsters has a total of 215 monsters, but in the Pokemon franchise, each evolutionary line holds a unique set of moves and stats. You cannot breed, and in Gen 2 and on, it's not as involved as this. Gen 2 was released in 1999, so, it's only fair to include it here. The monsters act as both the obstacle and the object of desire, similar to Dragon Warriors monsters. Exploration is similarly important, and it's fueled by the ability to find new creatures and potential friends. This and, of course, evolution, which is always exciting for any Pokemon fan, as it means your creatures get stronger and cooler than previously thought before. This was the main thing that set it apart from DWM, methinks. There is no evolution in Dragon Warriors monsters, only breeding. So it's like a little trade-off. Please let me know what your favorite memory was when you evolved a Pokemon. What did it feel like? What happened to make it evolve? Or if you're a Dragon Warriors monsters fan, what monster did you first breed and what was it like? I'm a sucker for personal stories like that. I read them all. Now about the art direction. Truthfully, I'm not so impressed with the designs of a lot of the Dragon Warriors monsters creatures. For a fantasy game, they're mostly fairly generic and hit all the typical archetypes. Also, the naming convention is too on the nose. They sound like tough nicknames you'd call yourself in a playground kid gang. They literally have Grizzly, Mummy, Shadow, and, Anteater? Tag yourself in the comments, I'm an anteater. Pokémon, on the other hand, was pretty clever with names for sure. Visually, it's not because it's a Game Boy Color game either. I mean, we're comparing it with Pokémon, and a lot of the designs of the Gen 1 Pokémon are pretty unique and have interesting lore in themselves. I just feel like this blob with eyes has a little more visual interest than this blob with eyes. However, I will say for a fact that I vastly prefer how Dragon Warriors Monsters decided to do the overall pixel art for the Game Boy Color title, even when comparing it to Gen 2 in passing. Ultimately, comparing gameplay, story, and art, I put Dragon Warriors Monsters at an A tier. There are more monsters, a unique breeding system, and the battling system feels more intense. Pokémon, though, has arguably more unique designs, a more in-depth story, and a world that feels more lived in. Both are extremely solid games, and I was kind of surprised. After researching this, I really want to pick up a copy on the 3DS myself. Let me know if you want a review of it. Next up, we'll be heading over to 1997's Harvest Moon for the Game Boy. This was published by Victor Interactive Software, so the story of this game is the most simple on the list. You're a girl, or boy, you actually get to pick, and you inherit a neglected farm from your grandfather, which then you have to restore and maintain to be a ranch master. Oh, whoops, that song was from the wrong game. Here we go. Anyway, your grandpa basically decides if you're doing good enough job or not, and if not, you get a game over. Very simple, and the gameplay is as well. But what's not to like about a simple farming game? Well, the issue very well may be that it was too simple. The gameplay is growing crops, chatting with townsfolk, and raising animals. Sounds normal, right? But the mechanics were stripped to their most basic, so that implementation on a system like the Game Boy was simpler to do. Some mechanics, like dating and just the broader social aspect in general, were limited for this purpose. However, it was still a commercially successful game, spawning 2 other titles on the Game Boy adjacent consoles in 1999 and 2000. So how does it compare to Pokémon? Well, for starters, they're both really different games. Clearly, still technically RPGs, but in different ways. The lack of story and social substance really hinders the first Game Boy Harvest Moon title comparatively to something like Pokémon or even Dragon Warriors Monsters. Those games had their main gameplay loop, but included story and funny NPC dialogue with it. The art direction is fine. Pixel art looks good, but I don't feel like it's mind-bending or anything. I do enjoy how cute it is for sure, but the music? No thanks. It's repetitive and short, which is definitely typical for many Game Boy games, but for a cozy sim like this, it only does the game a disservice, honestly. I'd rather play it in silence. Also, it's almost too energetic at times, which takes some of the coziness out of it. Pokemon's music can also be repetitive on certain tracks, but I feel there's enough wider variety in Red and Blue that Harvest Moon does not provide. Although Pokemon's pixel art is honestly debatably worse, I will still give Harvest Moon a C on this tier list for being really bland. Fun to pick up and play occasionally maybe, but I'd rather wait for future titles or just play the one on the Super Famicom/SNES. Next up is Final Fantasy Legend, also known as Saga. As I mentioned before, an inspiration for Pokemon's creation, this 1989 game was on the Game Boy, and was the first RPG on the system. And what inspired this game was, you guessed it, Tetris. Yeah, but instead of making another Tetris, they just said, let's make something completely different. They were inspired by Tetris's scope and how well it was doing. They re-released it in North America in 1998. Although released to mixed reception, much like the Pokémon franchise, it is now cited as one of the best games on the platform. The story is simple but fascinating. 4 party members wish to climb a central tower. They believe the top of this tower will bring them to paradise. They end up climbing it after solving puzzles, riddles, and fights, only to be plummeted down again. After rescaling it, they face the creator of the world. He mentioned creating this game, and the heroes that succeeded would be given a wish. common theme here, it seems. They defeat him and before entering an unknown door, decide it's best to return to their own world. A simple story for sure, but a clear goal is in mind that can give way for the rest of the gameplay to shine. So, does it? The gameplay fighting-wise is your typical fare, however, you do get to choose some things at the beginning of the game. You can choose a class, gender, and your name, obviously. But already, this simple part has a leg up on Pokémon. There are 3 classes, each with distinct stats, both ups and downs. You can choose to be a human, a mutant, or a monster. You have stats depending on your class, they change in different ways. Humans can get items which raise stats, mutants get theirs randomly changed after battles, which is called evolving, coincidentally, and monsters can eat meat from battles, which changes their composition depending on numerous factors. Now, for the art and the soundtrack, the world in this game blows the others out of the water. The tower is host to multiple floors, which have equally unique settings and gimmicks story-wise, which make exploration really intriguing. The pixel art in this title is also stellar for the time. Creature designs really stand out to me as being pretty unique overall. Obviously, some of them wouldn't work, like the magician, that's just some guy. But if these were catchable monsters, it would have been an epic experience. Overall, I think this one deserves a B+. Great music and impressive mechanics for its time. The sprite art is also nothing to scoff at. I would say that in scope, it is shorter than the other 2 games mentioned. Its story is fairly limited and the gameplay loop gets stale after a bit, but for artistry alone, this is a staple Game Boy game. From Tetris to this. Well, it's crazy, not gonna lie. Would you pick up this title? I'm really eyeing it. I'm so intrigued by its premise. Like and subscribe if you want me to play it one day. Okay, I admit, we're starting and ending on some stretches here. It's really hard to find compelling Game Boy titles, okay? We'll be taking a ride in the year 1999 in Japan and 2000 in the US. Technically speaking, this game came out for the PlayStation 1 in 1997, 1 year after the Japanese debut of Pokémon Red and Blue. The port over to the Game Boy Color took a couple years, but it finally got on the console, and that's why I feel like it kinda counts. It existed before Gen 2, so we're talking about it. This game is quite fascinating. Researching these Game Boy titles has me really invested in buying new games for my dusty old GBA. Azure Dreams was developed by Konami, and it's a roguelike of all things. The main character of this game is Ko, a 15-year-old kid who lost his father within a monster tower. You know, simple stuff. This monster tower is located within his town and provides a source of prosperity for the townsfolk. Treasure hunters travel here and the tower itself is a spectacle. In order to understand what happened to his dad, Guy, he teams up with a monster that is able to talk to humans and quests to reach the top of the tower. This kind of feels like the Final Fantasy Legend and Dragon Warriors monsters rolled up into one. For gameplay, we have the roguelike element. There is turn-based combat and some real-time elements too. Every turn you take in the game, the enemy monsters can move or attack you, as well as outside of the immediate battle. You collect treasures and monster eggs within the tower as well. With these eggs, you can hatch them to obtain more monsters and combine the monsters you obtain to make them more formidable. There are a total of 116 monsters in Azure Dreams, which doubles the one on the PlayStation, having only 50. Azure Dreams did take some inspiration from Pokémon, having the battles on the Game Boy Color version take place on their own screen instead of the field itself. The levels are randomized, there are various traps and obstacles that are littered about the floors, and also, you can't stay on any one floor for too long. Earthquakes can happen in the game, which adds a unique element by pushing the player forward and encourages a faster-paced gameplay. Overall, the gameplay is pretty unique, specifically for a Game Boy title, and its adaptation from 3D to 2D went about as well as it could have. It was far more ambitious than the PlayStation release, but that's to be expected. We're comparing only the Game Boy Color title to Red and Blue here, not its counterpart. The game is cited to being extremely addicting with its game loop, and I can totally see why. The sprite art, in my opinion, is the overall weakest of the series mentioned today. The color kinda does the game a disservice, in my opinion. It's very garish and looks like Missing No kinda jumped all over the screen. It's passable, clearly, and the best thing about it are the monsters, but as for the environments and anything that aren't close-up portraits, it's kind of simple and hard to look at. Pokemon's sprite art isn't my favorite either, to be fair. The monsters themselves are great, but it kind of suffers the same quote-unquote problem that Azure Dreams has. Ultimately, they're kind of on the same playing field, but I think Azure Dreams is a little bit worse. Not as bad as Harvest Moon though, so I'll give it a B. Here are some of my favorite monster designs. And every game's not without its weird ones. Clearly, this is just some guy and some fan service succubus lady. The music's also really solid. I always admire Game Boy composers because they had barely anything to work with. Many of these tracks are great to listen to, and I feel like hearing them on loop wouldn't be so bad. Pretty on par with the rest of the games on this list. I particularly enjoy this one, At the Item Shop. Let me know if you want me to make a video covering the composition of Pokémon soundtracks on the Game Boy. Ultimately, I give Azure Dreams a B. Since it's almost like a mix of Final Fantasy Legend and Dragon Warrior's Monsters, in a way, I feel like it justly deserves a decent score. The gameplay is the most interesting out of the aforementioned games due to, in part, being a different genre, but as far as a monster taming game goes, I think the genre works better in such a limited scope as the Game Boy. The creature designs are very good, and honestly, the only thing holding it back are the rest of the visuals. So the answer of my ongoing question of, are Red and Blue actually good games? It's a definite yes for now. They introduced the monster taming premise on a handheld console in such a way to be appealing to a wide breadth of people. The music, gameplay loop, and creature designs themselves are all really solid, and R&B stand out among the other RPG titles of the Game Boy that I hadn't even mentioned yet. Let me know if you want more parts in this series. Are they the best games? That's clearly up to interpretation. However, it is safe to say that these titles do hold up in many ways, and deserve as much as any to be on the pedestal of influential games. These are only some of the titles that I really enjoyed researching for. Which ones were you surprised by? Do you want to take a look at any of these? Which games should I cover in part 2? Thanks for sticking around, and I hope you have a great day, trainers.